NBA Fantasy Power Rankings. Nikola Jokić holds first in Week 12. RotoWire highlights the top performers heading into Week 13 of Fantasy Hoops. Welcome back, Hoops fans. It's time for your NBA Fantasy Power Rankings. We've got the top performers from Week 12, and let me tell you, these players are putting up some huge numbers. But there's one guy who's still leading the pack, and we've got all the details coming up right now. Hey everyone, I'm your name, and today we're diving into the Fantasy Power Rankings for Week 12. Whether you're playing in a salary cap league or just keeping track of the top fantasy producers, we've got all the info you need to dominate your league. So let's jump in. First up, we've got the big names who are absolutely crushing it in the fantasy world. And sitting at the top as usual, is the one and only Nikola Jokić. Jokić, the reigning MVP, continues to show why he's the king of fantasy hoops. Despite missing the first 2 games of the Nuggets' 4-game week due to illness, he still managed to average an insane 71 fantasy points per game. That's right, he came back with a vengeance, posting a 35-point, 15-assist, 12-rebound triple-double against the Nets. And just to prove he's human, he followed it up with a 19-point, 18-rebound double-double against the Mavericks. He's a fantasy machine, and his 65.8 fantasy points per game this season are still the best in the league. If you've got Jokić on your team, you're sitting pretty right now. But let's move on to number 2. LaMelo Ball jumps into the number 2 spot this week, with a 61.6 fantasy points per game performance. Even though the Hornets only had 2 games due to a cancelled matchup, Ball made the most of it. He dropped a 32-point, 10-rebound double-double against the Suns, and then followed up with a 25-point, 11-assist double-double in the rematch. Even though he struggled with his shooting, putting up just 39.6%, his volume was unmatched, taking 53 shots over those 2 games. That's what you want in a fantasy star. Lots of opportunities. At number 3, it's Domantas Sabonis of the Sacramento Kings, who had an incredible 58.4 fantasy points per game last week. With De'Aaron Fox missing a couple of games, Sabonis stepped up in a big way. He posted a career-high 28 rebounds in a win over the Celtics and followed it up with a 22-point, 15-rebound, 8-assist performance against the Bulls. Sabonis is proving why he's one of the most valuable big men in fantasy this season. Next up, Jaren Jackson Jr. of the Memphis Grizzlies comes in at number 4, with 56.9 fantasy points per game. Despite Ja Morant returning from injury, Jackson put together an impressive run, averaging nearly 30 points, 10 rebounds, and 2.3 blocks per game. His 35-point outing against the Mavericks and 33 points against the Timberwolves made him an elite fantasy performer this week. Rounding out the top 5 is Alperen Sengun of the Houston Rockets, with 52.7 fantasy points per game. Sengun had a stellar 2-game week, posting 26 points and 10 rebounds against the Wizards, and then followed that up with a 32-point, 14-rebound performance against the Grizzlies. Despite the Rockets only playing 2 games, Sengun made sure he took full advantage of his minutes and delivered some of the best fantasy numbers of the week. Alright, now let's look ahead to Week 13. These are the players who are set to produce big numbers, and with at least 3 games on the schedule, they could be key assets for your fantasy team. Victor Wembanyama and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander are 2 players you'll want to target. Wembanyama has been solid all season, averaging 55.1 fantasy points per game. This week, the Spurs have a 3-game slate against the Lakers, Grizzlies, and Heat, which means plenty of chances for him to rack up those fantasy points. Meanwhile, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who's averaging 53.6 fantasy points per game, has a busy week ahead with games against the 76ers, Cavaliers, Mavericks, and Nets. With the Thunder star player looking to keep his momentum going, SJ is definitely someone you want to keep in your lineup. Also on the radar, Anthony Davis of the Lakers and Karl-Anthony Towns of the Timberwolves. Davis is posting 53.2 fantasy points per game, and with the Lakers facing some solid matchups, he's in line to keep up his production. As for Towns, he's been steadily contributing, and with 3 games on the slate, he could be in for another big week. And last but not least, Jason Tatum. The Celtics star is averaging 49.7 fantasy points per game and has a favorable schedule this week, with matchups against the Raptors, Magic, and Hawks. Tatum's scoring, rebounding, and playmaking will be crucial to his fantasy value this week. There you have it, folks, your NBA Fantasy Power Rankings for Week 12. With all these big names producing at an elite level, it's clear that this fantasy season is heating up. If you want to keep crushing it, make sure you're targeting these top performers and stay ahead of the competition. Thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell for more NBA fantasy tips. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Who's your fantasy MVP this week? See you next time and good luck with your lineups.